We're continuing the series here in Samuel. I've titled the series "Looking for a King," and it will lead into Christmas when we recognize that the Jewish people finally got their true king in Jesus. But right now they've been looking for a king, and Samuel's kind of filled the gap as a leader for a little bit, but now they are ready for a king. And so the title of this series, or this week's sermon, is "Rejecting God as King." And so the people of this time, they have Samuel leading them. So they had a period of judges, and Samuel was, given to God's service by Hannah. And so he grew up and became their leader. God spoke to him and gave him wisdom, and he was a prophet. And so now, as he gets older, he gets this time where he has sons who are not following after him. And so we think about those first three verses. Samuel's getting old. He's probably not going to be around for very much longer. He has appointed his sons to lead the people, good old Joel and Abijah, however you pronounce that. And so they are not leading in their father's footsteps. They've become corrupt. We live in a world where there are a lot of corrupt leaders, don't we? Both in a country like ours, which is fairly stable, but there's still corruption there. And then you go to other places of the world, and it's just complete corruption. Some of the countries around Africa and Asia, Central and South America, there are just rampant people accepting bribes, perverting justice. When we lived in Mexico, you'd get pulled over by the police for no real reason, just because I had an American license plate on my car. And so you get pulled over, and all that they want is a bribe. The first thing they do is they'll take your driver's license and say, you know what, you can come back tomorrow and get your driver's license at the office, and we'll have to pay these fines. Or you could, give me 50 pesos, 100 pesos right now, which would have been, like $10 or something like that. Not that much money. And that's how they operate. Their income is very low, and they just see it as a way to get more income. And the sons of Samuel are doing the same thing. They're accepting bribes and perverting justice. An unjust judge will give justice to the highest payer, which is not true justice, is it? And so as we think about this section, it's just a little side mini sermon in the middle of this as I've read this. And so a couple points, that there is the importance of teaching and raising the next generation to follow the Lord. And there's nothing here that says Samuel wasn't a good father, didn't point them to the Lord. And sometimes when children become adults, they have to make their own choices, and parents can't make them for their kids. But just the responsibility of us as parents, as us as grandparents, as us as a church, to raise that next generation, to share with them about who God is, who Jesus was, what Jesus did for them. They need to follow after him. And as I said, ultimately, that's between them and God, whether they choose to follow that. But we have that importance, and we also have that responsibility to raise those people up, point them to God. And as a parent, there's really no greater task that we might have, apart from being a good husband or a good wife, of following God, as it is to raise our kids in a way that points them, gives them every opportunity to come to faith. And so I can provide for my family. I can give them good Christmas gifts, good gifts for their birthday. They could have a nice house, good video games, good technology, all of those things. But if I've neglected to raise them in a way that points them to Jesus, then I have failed as a parent. And again, I just want to say that there are times where children make their own choices. And so as long as I have done that and taught them and displayed to them with my own life, and they go astray, I'm not saying that we are a failure as a parent, because that is because of God, but we are required by God to teach our kids the way they should go, as the proverb says. And then when they are old, they will not depart from it. And so just as we think through what's happening in Israel, we see over and over where a generation comes to the Lord. They follow after him. They get rid of all their idols, and they choose to serve God faithfully. And then what happens? Another generation comes up. They don't know the Lord, who are far from him. And we see this cycle. Then there's punishment by God to get them their attention, to bring them back. God's hand of protection comes off of them because those next generations don't follow the Lord. And my youngest brother, Reed, who you've met Scott. So my youngest brother, Reed, about 2 months ago, invited my dad, my other brother, Scott, myself, Elijah, and my nephew, Noah, who is here with Scott, to do a Bible study together online. So there was an end times Bible study he was wanting to do that lasts a whole year. And so I did one where it was just myself, my brothers, and my dad, but then Elijah was able to join us yesterday morning. So 3 generations of Hewitts, all online, opening God's Word, studying together. And I just thought how beautiful it is to see what my parents have imparted on to us, and my grandparents imparted to my parents, and now I'm seeking to impart to Elijah and Abby. That's how we are, what we are called to do, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. And in my extended family, that's not a guarantee, because I have aunts and uncles who were raised by my same grandparents who love the Lord, who chose not to love the Lord, and their kids, my cousins, are not serving the Lord. And so I just wanted us to think of that importance. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, and us as a church, the importance it is to be praying for those kids. We've got kids right there. We've got kids right up there who are right now in their lessons learning about Jesus, learning about God. And I don't know what their lessons are this week, but our responsibility is to pray for them and give them every opportunity to build up parents so they can do that for their kids, to be a church that raises kids in a way that points them to the Lord. So now we got the people that Samuel's children are not following the Lord. They're doing all kinds of bad things. And so we get to this place, this sad place where they begin to not trust in God to lead them, and they ask for a king. So we'll look at chapters 4-7. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old." That's a bit tough, right? Yes. I don't usually start with that when I come to somebody. You're getting kind of old, so maybe you shouldn't do something. No. You're old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this pleased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." But here's Samuel. He's leading the people, and the people are not happy with how things are going. And so he feels a bit rejected, right? He feels rejected, but ultimately God's saying they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And we see this rejection over and over as a cycle with the people of Israel. You know, at one point they're worshiping God, following him, and the next moment they are being, taking gods from the other nations and not following God. They're rejecting him. So Samuel felt that they were rejecting him, but in reality, they were actually rejecting God. This rejection over and over. And as they do that, they're going to have consequences for what they're doing, for the choices that they are making. They are choosing to not have God be their leader. They want a man to be their leader, and they're wanting to be just like everybody else, which is not a good thing to do. So let's continue. As they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. And so God is saying they rejected me. This is what they have, the cycle that they're doing over and over again. Sometimes our own life cycle can be like this. As we come to faith and we're excited, we're serving God. And then things get busy, we get distracted, and we kind of have a bit of a trough where we stop following God the way we should. We get caught up in all kinds of things. And then we got to get right before God again. And there's that cycle with the people of Israel. Sometimes that's the cycle in our lives. And so here that God is telling Samuel, give them some wisdom. Tell them what they are getting themselves into. Those of you who are parents, and maybe you can think of it now, if you have, I mean, all of us have been a child, but think of it, there's probably been times where you as a parent or you as a child either gave some really good advice or received really good advice that you chose not to follow. Anybody else, or is that just me? I've received good advice before that I've chosen not to follow. I've also tried to give good advice that hasn't necessarily been followed. And that's what the people are doing today. So God's telling Samuel, tell them what's going to happen if they accept the king. And I won't read over all the things, but it's essentially saying that they're going to be ruler. You're going to become their slave. They're going to take the best of what you have. They're going to take all these things to. That's okay. I thought I was about to start to have to sing. So, yeah, that would have been interesting. Yeah. I'm not quite as talented as John. I was very impressed by he's playing two instruments at one time. I struggle with the radio sometimes. So, but yeah, here we are. So all these things that a king is going to do if they have a king, and there aren't things that you just think, oh, that'd be great. It's going to cost them to have it. When we choose to not follow God, there is a cost. And so as we think through these things, Samuel gives them this advice. And so the Israelites have continually rejected God. Samuel seeks to give them wisdom to follow. But what do you think the people do? He's warning them. He's giving them wisdom. They're like, they don't care. Not my teenagers. I hear some other teenagers are like this, have this attitude, right? You give them good advice, and they go and do the opposite. Samuel's trying to get them to see this is what it's going to cost if you do that. But yet they have chosen not to follow him. So 19 through 22, but the people refused to listen to Samuel. That wise advice, this is the cost it's going to take. I'm warning you, it's not going to be a good thing. And they said, no, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations. The king to lead us and go out before us and fight our battles. I don't know if you notice things, but it's normally not the king that fights the battles, right? If you're a general or you're an admiral, you're directing the soldiers who do the fighting, and that's usually what a king does. And I know in the Bible there are times where kings are in the battle and they do lose their lives, and ultimately that's what happens to Saul. But most of the fighting is done by the common people. Then Samuel heard all the people said. He repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, listen to them and give them a king. Then Samuel said to the Israelites, everyone go back to your own towns. And so here we are. God's given them approval to do this. And I just wanted to clarify, them asking and wanting a king isn't necessarily something that is apart from God's plan or what he wanted. If we look at Genesis 17, the people chose not to follow the wisdom, if you're filling out your little notes, and they wanted to be like all the other nations. I'll give you a second to write that down, and then we'll go to Genesis 17:6. I'll just go ahead and read it. I will make you very fruitful. This is a promise to Abraham. So back when God is establishing them as a nation, I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. So even way back when God is first setting up the nation, there's an acknowledgement at some point there will be kings. In Deuteronomy 17, there's actually a place in the law that explains about how a king should operate if a king is leading God's people. Do you think those kings followed that advice? No. Here's some of the things that as kings are supposed to do. They are not to take many wives. Do you know any kings who took a lot of wives? Solomon. Yeah. They're not to collect a lot of gold. Solomon's not doing real good, is he? David, yeah. They all did things contrary to God's law, the rules he gave for king, and so they did not follow after him, and so or follow the laws that God had given for them to do. And so they have asked for king, which is again not contrary to God's plan, but the way they were doing it was to reject Samuel, to reject God, so that way they might be able to be like all the other nations. So anytime we say, well, everyone else is doing it, or I want to be just like everybody else, most likely that's not a very good thing. There are some really good mentors we could have, one person, two people who we think I could really learn from them. I want to be like them. But as soon as we say, I just want to be like everybody else, that is usually a cop-out of something we want that everybody else has, and many times it's not the way God wants us to be. Are we called to live like everybody else? No, we're not. We're called to be set apart. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And so these people, they wanted to be like everybody else. And that was not how God wanted them to be. Everything about the law was to set them apart, to make them different than everybody else, to make them as a people who are following after God. And again, at times they did that well, and at times, like right now, they rejected God. So how about us? How do we reject God in our own lives? Well, when my life is about me, and I make myself my own king, right? I'm the king of myself, I'm the king of my house, then I'm rejecting God. Because that's the place where, when I came to faith, when I chose to follow him, I put him as my king. I chose to follow him. So if my life is all about me, and I am rejecting God. How do we know if we've made our lives about us? What do we talk about? There's nothing wrong with sharing a bit about ourselves with people and what's going on. I did it earlier about my week, right? But are we also talking about what God's doing in us, what God is speaking to us, what he has done for us? Because the things we say a lot of times reflect our thinking. And we can get very self-focused And I can admit and confess that I do this from time to time, where I am only thinking about myself. I'm being selfish when I'm called to live bigger than that. I'm called to follow through on the promise I made to God when I came to faith, to live for Him, to follow after Him. And so it's very easy for this mindset of just thinking about ourselves to come back in. Another way we reject God is when we purposely sin. There are sins that we do and we realize, oh man, I did it again and didn't really realize it. And there are times when we just purposely sin. We know it's wrong and we do it anyway. And that's rejecting God when we do that. We're choosing to do what we want to do. We want to not follow the things that God has told us, the way we are called to live. And so when we do it purposefully, we are stating and rejecting God. You ever seen toddlers when you tell them not to do something and they look at you and they just do it immediately? And it's just like, I'm looking at you. I know you told me not to do it, but I am going to do it anyways, right? And that's how we can be. And when we think of it, we think, oh, that's just they're immature. They're just learning. They haven't learned yet. But yet we can do the same thing with God when we purposely sin. When we make other things of this world our king. So there are all kinds of things in this world, whether it's money, whether it's our jobs, whether it's sports, even things that are good, like family. Some of those other things are good too, but if our families, all of these things can become an idol. It could be something that we place before God. And anytime there's anything above God in our lives, we are rejecting Him, because He has told us that He is our King. He is the one we are called to follow. And so as we close, I just have two questions for you. Is God truly your King? Because when we come to faith and we choose to follow after Him, that's the place He should be. And so maybe there's somebody here who has never done that, never made God their King to serve Him. And I know the song we sang earlier says, good, good Father, but He is a good, good King if we follow after Him. So is God truly your King in your life? Have you submitted to follow Him? And then the second question, what evidence do I see of that in my life? Just like I said earlier, that we can tell about what we talk about if we are self-focused, or if we're focused on others and caring for others and focused on God by our conversations. We can look at our own life, and what does our life look like? Where do we spend our time? What are the things that we do? And if I looked at all those things, is those things pointing to the fact that I am following God with all that I have? I love Jesus and want to live for Him each day. What's the evidence do I see? Maybe there are some things we need to change, some thoughts, some actions that would make our lives better reflect Him. God is a God who loves and cares and shows grace and mercy. But He's also, in His Word we see He's a jealous God, one that doesn't want us to commit adultery on Him, right? We are to love Him and serve Him only. We are not to have other gods in our lives. So we've been doing one thing at the end of each sermon for a number of weeks now, just a reminder of what that is. So we just take the time to think through maybe what God's speaking to you. What have you learned? What is a question or a challenge? One thing maybe you need to change or do or not do. And so the point of this is just to have that time to think through, pray through with God about something, but it also helps us learn. And it's been wonderful to see and hear other people, what they have gotten from God during the message time through His Word. And today I just encourage you after the service, after you've written your one thing down, maybe your morning tea, find somebody you feel comfortable with and share that one thing with them. Share what God is doing. Again, that's just reinforcing what God's speaking to you about. And so we're going to have 1 minute for you to write down and pray your one thing. And then I will close in prayer.